Good evening, everybody. Pete Morris. This is the Comanche Zoom for March 18th on painting your Comanche. The topic is going to be described right here, just so you can see it. Luke Strawbridge is going to be talking with us about everything. Well, not everything you want to know about painting your Comanche. As he says, if some paint shop says they know everything there is to know about painting, go to another shop. But anyhow, here we are. The topic is painting your Comanche. Unfortunately, the example he has is not a Comanche. It's a Piper, but it's not a Comanche. But you know, we'll get around that with no problem at all. And with that, we're going to start our usual who you are, where you are, and what you fly. So go for it. Any key your mic and talk.
All right, I will. This is Tracy Ligon. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas, and that was my Twinkie back behind me that my love and joy that I ended up selling a little while back and still miss.
Thank you, Tracy.
Gary Lindsay here. Oops.
Yep.
Okay, as you can see, 260B 9020 Papa.
Welcome, Terry.
I'm George Merriam in Western Massachusetts. I got my twin engine rating in an airplane just like that in Tim's Air Park in just north of Austin, Texas. And that was in 1968, I believe, a little while back. That was when twin Comanches were new.
I'm Pete Morris. I'm in Connecticut, Danielson, Connecticut. I have my old Comanche. It was 1960 250, which had a gear collapse on landing, and the insurance company bought it and helped me pay for my new Comanche, which is a 1963 250 out here on the ramp. And I love it because it actually has an autopilot. The other one didn't.
Is there anybody here or in your organization that's out on the West Coast versus all East Coast people?
Well, we got one that's a little further west. We have Jim Peters from Australia.
I'm just
But yes, there have been some West Coast people that have chimed in for sure. Also Canadian, also Texas and Florida. So we're getting around.
I'm Southern California.
Good.
Isn't Hank in Southern California somewhere?
Hank Spearman?
Yeah.
He's in Illinois, I think.
Oh, he is? Somebody is from the LA area somewhere. They'll pipe up in just a minute.
Bob Capiola is with his twin. He's at Whiteman, just like me. But there's somebody else I've heard talk.
Yeah, I've heard quite a few from the California area.
Well, just like ATC, if you have a quiet spot, key the mic.
Ed Cullen out of South Lake, Texas, Comanche 250 with you tonight.
Welcome, Ed.
How many 250s versus the 260s were made?
I'm thinking it's almost equal. I'm not sure. There are other people who definitely know the answer to that. I don't.
Excuse me.
Actually, I think there's a Wikipedia article on that. It actually lists all the serial numbers and everything else. If you have access to Aircraft Blue Book Digest, they'll list them too.
Okay.
Blue Book Digest from, oh, not VREF, but Blue Book Digest. Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. CJ, Vermont, flying 180 when I go to get it from California and a 260B. And I'm fixing my name.
I'll fix it for you right now.
Thanks.
Hey, CJ, Ed Cullen, any,
Ed,
hi, how you doing?
good.
Any word on how the trio Autopilot's doing as far as the FAA goes? Is it
Let's
moving?
see. Yes, it is moving. So I actually have recent news. The preliminary plan has been submitted. We're in the process, or they're in the process of using the 180 that I'm about to go and fly back to ComancheTown at Sun and Fun to do the verification install with the new final design brackets as submitted and as are being PMA'd. They're going to fly an apparently non-required runaway trim scenario just for their own satisfaction to confirm that although the servos are the same, the capstan and cage are new to allow that the servos to handle the control forces of the Comanche. They did so absolutely magnificently in the test flight. And in fact, the capstans worked so well that they had to really dial down the forces being transmitted. So it's not expected to be an issue. It's just a checklist item. The question mark, and so the brackets are expected to, they're being machined now, the final ones out of the final drawings. And the question mark is really just in this post Boeing 747 MAX 8 situation world, with the FAA sort of reassessing how they want to handle some of these newer certifications of equipment coming over from the experimental world. How are they going to handle it? So they're trying to, so what we're seeing is this, they seem to be good with the plan, and obviously the Autopilot is a tremendous piece of safety equipment, so it fits the FAA mission, which is safety. The main question is what are they going to do, if anything, to change the approval process? And the experimental stuff coming over is going through a slightly different process than the major vendors who kind of have their own thing going. So we will see. But it's basically at the end of next week, it'll be in FAA hands completely, and then we wait. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that kind of says it's moving, but it's, it's in the hands of the FAA. You never know where it's going to go.
Yeah, exactly.
I
Exactly.
don't think we're going to see anything for then a couple of months, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that may be true. The big thing that will help that is because we did the group buy special, they know that they need 100 of these for Comanches. And
Yep.
so that order process of the brackets, the the capstan servos, and particularly the Autopilot head units will happen, and we won't be looking at stock shortages.
Yes, right. I remember talking to them about that.
Oh, great. Okay, so you've already been in touch directly. Yeah, that's the best knowledge that I have. Trying to think if there's anything else to add. Just that there is a secondary group buy special out right now, and it's not quite as good as the original one where we all came together as a community, put our deposits together, and basically not just expressed how strong our support was for any and all Autopilots, but made sure that they had financing for the development effort itself. The second group buy special is a couple $100 less. It's still really good, but they're not taking deposits. They're just, you get on the list, and if you put your demand in before the SDC issues, you get this great price of, I think it's $59.95. So not bad.
Oh, it sounds like they're trying hard.
We're beating them.
Yep.
Like a lot. Because the Comanche community has provided like the mechanical engineering resources, the engineering resources, the DER resources. We've advanced all of that to accelerate this project and make it possible without skipping any steps. I mean, it's critical that this be done thoroughly, safely, precisely, but it has been done with all of the resources available as needed.
That's great.
Yeah, we're pretty excited. I mean, everything's like a little delayed, but how many years have we needed a modern Autopilot,
Oh, forever.
right? And now we've got 3 coming, 1 here, 1 about to be here, and Garmin is making great progress. So part of the fun has been just finding out about the different installs about all of them, because there's a lot of confusion. And at some point, we'll need to put together a Comanche Zoom on that one, but it's going to be a little delicate because if you think about it, we don't really want all our supporting vendors to be in like a ring fight,
That makes sense.
So we'll have to figure out how to do that.
Super. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking. And thanks for being here.
Oh, no problem.
Well, everybody, hi, everybody. Good evening. Who you are, where you are, and what's your fly. Jump into any quiet moment.
I'll jump in. Alan Cheek down here in Peachtree City, Georgia, just south of Atlanta, 63250. And Adam had a question last week, and my iPad died concerning the F-14. What was it like to fly with? So I'll just, anyway, Adam, if you're on or whatever, but I flew both the F-14 and the A4 Skyhawk, instructed in that. So I always told people the F-14 was like flying a Cadillac, but the A4F Super Fox was like flying a Porsche. So both great air. But one always had a computer in between you and the machine, and the other one was just push rods to a hydraulic power pack. And anyways, I mean, you definitely felt like you strapped on that airplane. But I love my Comanche too. So anyway.
Alan, you just had way too many blessings in your life. We're trying not to be jealous.
Sorry.
Good
I
on
was
you.
a C, and I was a C student in high school, and I don't even want to tell you my SAT score. So
We're just gonna tell all the young people. We'll leave that part out. Tell them to be a straight A student and be like Alan.
there you go. There you go. Now just tell, hey, if you want to fly, figure out a way. Go left, and there's a problem in your way, go left, go right, go around, go through, but don't let anybody stop you. So
Now you're talking. Well, welcome and good to see you again, Alan.
yeah, you too.
Yeah. Jim Peters, it is a pleasure to see you back in the room, sir. I hope we'll have some interesting things to say.
Well, I haven't got any news. We're lucky with COVID, of course. We've probably got about 10 cases in hotel quarantine, and that's about it. Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
You Aussies know how to do it. Here in America, we're in a little bit more of a mess.
Well, we're an island, that helps. And we're a bit spread out. We don't have high densities. Population makes a big difference.
Yep. Yeah. Vermont's had it pretty mellow as well. But I had to do a bit of traveling, and it was shocking how different one section of America was from another section. And the other really shocking thing was to land at an airport, walk down the street to a supermarket, and observe the dramatic difference in the reactions from people seeing somebody new at a small airport and somebody else seeing somebody new at a local supermarket. Where they were horrified, by the way. I was regarded with great suspicion at the supermarket, whereas at the airport, they were like, hey, mate, come on over. Or, oh, you got a problem? Sure, we'll help. Well, if you popped into the room, just jump in any quiet moment and say who you are, where you are, and what you fly. Oh, for anybody.
By the way, I missed out on the Surefire magnetos as well. I tried to stay in touch with Surefire, and eventually they put me on to one of the vendors. So I probably missed out on the group buy. and I haven't
We're
ordered
trying
anything.
to negotiate a new one in like literally I got a call from Ron Kyle, who actually presented on long distance flying, saying, CJ, I want to get one before I fly to ComancheTown. And I said, well, Jason Hutchinson and I, we're going to be talking again. So I'll be trying to
Oh.
get on that one imminently. You may be at the leading
I-
edge of a new one. I'll talk to Jason
Well,
and see what he can do.
I stayed in touch, but I've been maneuvered out of the group by somehow.
Well, let's see
Yeah.
if we can get another one going.
And I need two. I need two.
Okay, one per engine, yeah. Okay, I've got my marching orders between you and Ron, Jim, so let me see what we can pull off. If not, going into Sun and Fun, there'll almost certainly be a show special.
I'm also looking for, I've got a damaged right aileron. I'm looking for a right aileron for my PA30. So if anyone knows of any, I'd like to know. Thanks.
Okay, I will send a quick text message over to get that into the trading post section of the Comanche Zoom invites. And it's a buy sell trade if you're looking. And so we'll make sure that we've got that Jim Peters is looking for a left aileron, did you say?
Right.
Right aileron.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Can they reskin it, Jim?
Yeah, they can. That's the alternative. And I'll have to make a comparison between the costs, and I don't know how it'll work out.
Generally, it's going to be cheaper to reskin, but that's just normal.
Okay. By the time
Well, you're almost safer with it because you're not going to know when you get one what the internal condition of it is either.
that's the trouble. Most of this stuff is often corroded. That's the trouble. It's been sitting out somewhere and corroding. Yeah.
Although one of the amazing things about our Comanches is they were all zinc chromate before they were put together. So our corrosion resistance is greater than almost any other aircraft. I found out that that was only ever done to float planes normally. All right. Jimmy, I'm going to copy you on the trading post report I'm writing on your behalf, and it'll go out in next Wednesday's invite to everybody. What year PA30? Not that it really makes a difference. And what's your paint? Jim Peters, what color's your paint?
I think you're on mute,
I
Jim.
lost connection.
I think it's Imran White.
Okay, classic.
There is
All right.
a shop swap meet thing form on the website you can get to too. If you go to the northeastcomanche.org, and the lower right-hand link at the top of the page is for forms. And on that page, you will find a thing for the swap meet. You can put in whatever you need to sell, buy, or find.
Okay.
That will come to me. I will get it to them. No problem.
So my name is Eric Woods. I fly out of the Dome of Death in Washington, D.C.
Dome.
I have a 1960 Comanche 250 that I bought about 2.5 years ago, and it's been in the shop most of that time, getting upgrades, and actually looking forward to flying it this year.
Eric Woods, welcome. And thanks for being part of this. Would you like to be connected? Because there are about 12 Comanche drivers right around you.
Yeah, I know Chew myself.
Yep.
Absolutely.
All righty. Let me just, do you know how to type your email address into the chat window? Because if so, Pete Morse and Les Thomas. We'll try to get you connected with some of your surrounding brethren. If not, we can guide you. And then I saw a raised hand here from, oh, John, speak up. Got it, Eric. And John Barley, go ahead and unmute. me.
John Barley, you're muted still.
Yeah, everybody joins muted. You'll have to
Okay,
unmute
there
to
you go.
talk.
Can you hear me now?
You're good.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, I fly a Comanche 180 up here in Waterville, Maine. And I'm very interested in hearing about the painting because mine hasn't been painted since 1970. And it still looks fairly good except for one aileron, but it is certainly in need of a paint job.
You know, we were just doing our Zoom test flight. John, it's a pleasure to see you. You and I think, met for the first time at Groton.
That's right. Yeah, and I made it back. You know, I barely outran a thunderstorm coming back.
Oh my Lord. Well,
Yeah.
Welcome and glad to have you with us. So Luke
you.
was mentioning that touch-ups are possible too. I mean, just because your paint's old doesn't mean that it's not good.
Well, it's old, and it was a fairly inexpensive paint job in 1970, and the years have not been kind to it.
Well, good. You've come to the right place, we hope. And everybody just jump in, say who you are, where you are, and what you fly.
My name is Larry Sutliff. I fly out of South Albany, New York airport, and I have a 1963 250.
Good to see you, Larry, and welcome, and thanks for being here tonight.
Wouldn't miss it.
Should be interesting.
Used to be in your area, Larry. I went to RPI in Troy.
Oh, did you?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, and another RPI graduate right here.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, so did my brother, but I broke ranks and went to Clarkson. So.
Oh, we used to beat them in hockey all the time.
And Clarkson used to, I was just going to say, Clarkson used to come give RPI a hockey lesson every once in a while.
This is like old home week. It's awesome.
There we go.
And if you just joined, jump in and say who you are, where you are, and what you fly.
Hi, John Futter, Orange, Massachusetts, and a Comanche 260C from 1969.
The original and still one of the best. Welcome, John. Good to see you. For those that are going to ComancheTown, we spoke with, we did a group buy special on a hotel just because although ComancheTown's kind of about camping, we have quite a few who are like my camping days are behind me. So the hotel, and we had some questions, like people were like, gosh, the group buy special seems to end on the 16th, but the show ends on the 18th. That's been corrected. So you can now book anywhere from the 8th to the 22nd. And I just spoke with the hotel manager, and it's $82 a night, American. I think with taxes and fees, it ends up being $93. Some people camp anyways, and then just grab a night to sort of get organized either on the way in or the way out. And check your Comanche Zoom invite if for details on that. And we'll also be posting that to Facebook and Delphi.
Yeah, I would probably be putting that information on the website too. That'll help people out.
We have a quiet crowd this evening. I'm going to be starting to call on you.
I guess
guys in a
I
second.
could jump in. I'm Rick Foster from North Carolina. And I really enjoy the Zoom meetings, but I fly a 1970 260C turbo and a 1960 180.
I
You are
haven't seen
blessed.
that. I gotta see that when you're flying both of them together. That's
I
gotta
tell
be,
you,
I don't think it's legitimate for anybody to own two Comanches. I mean, you're going to spread the wealth around, guys.
my wife is very generous.
Rick, we are so glad to have you here with us. And we also thank you for the support that you're providing for Comanche engineering and defense. It's much appreciated.
You bet.
Yeah, my second plane is a 1970 Cessna 150. So I go back and forth between the 150 and the Comanche, and it makes the Comanche feel like a jet.
Hey, Alan Cheek here. 2 points I'll just bring up. They're not related at all to tonight's topic, but since we've got a lull. So the first thing was just tooling around on Facebook. I found this great, Facebook webpage that I just put in through the chat room, but it's called Fly In Destinations. So it's FLY with a hyphen IN Destinations. And it seems like it's a pretty cool page that lists all sorts of places that have airports that you can either land and camp or pop into a hotel, but obviously like kind of very cool places to sit there and that you'd want to take your Comanche on in if you're looking for some place to go. And then there kind of almost seems like they're starting to break it down by region or so. So for the West Coast, guys, the East Coast and the mid states and stuff. But anyways, I thought that was I thought I'd post that here on the chat page, just if you're looking for something to look on Facebook. The second thing, and I think kind of mentioned this last week or so, but anyway, so I've discovered with helping my friends getting his 5960 all up to square, we finally got his airplane up to Webco, but I sat there and I started going through my own logbooks and going, I think I might be due for a gear AD. And I'm actually within 40 hours of it. So the point being, I called Heritage, which we took my friend's airplane up to. The earliest they could get me in to do something like that would be September. Called Webco. The earliest they could get me in was May 24th, which I said, hey, let's book that date. And then I called Clifton Aero, and the guy said, yeah, maybe June, but probably more like July. So just a heads up, if you guys are looking for maintenance out of our 3 great shops, and I know there's a few others, but anyways, you gotta get on the stick early. I went ahead and booked an annual for Heritage just because I wanted, I normally have a shop right here at my airport that's done mine, but every 7 to 10 years, I like to have one of the 3 go through it and look at, because they're obviously Comanche specific and anyway, I've been a little lax on that, but I thought, I think it's time to do that. Plus I want to change 4 fuel bladders and some other stuff. So anyways, if you're looking for some big projects and you're looking for the big 3 guys, shops, give a call and plan ahead because they are booked long out in the year.
Well, I have some good news. We have a Comanche Zoom coming up with the 2 greatest landing gear, 1,000-hour gear AD experts, which is actually Matt Kirk of Comanche Gear and Hans Newbert, who created the 1,000-hour gear AD DVD. And then Matt Kirk also has a manual that's kind of de rigueur for doing the 1,000-hour gear AD. So Matt just had back surgery and he is healing up and then we'll be coming in. So we actually had him scheduled for March and then it'll be April working around ComancheTown. But although the 3 shops are good, the 1,000-hour gear AD is meticulous and picky, but it is mostly about taking it apart and washing everything and measuring everything and checking tolerances and making sure it goes back together with the squat switches and sensors all correctly adjusted. So it is a really great way to learn your landing gear system. I went through the 1,000 gear AD last year when Zach Grant was doing annuals on airplanes, because the majors weren't really doing too much flying in the June, July period. And boy, is that a learning experience. I recommend it to anybody.
At the Heritage Aero is at Freeport, Illinois, of course. The airport manager passed away and he was doing some A&P work. And so that all got shifted to Heritage. Plus when the plague hit, they got rid of some of their staff and business came back
That's your Charlene.
hot and heavy. So that's kind of the story there.
Yep.
That's helpful to know. Thanks for the update on Heritage.
Okay, it is that time. I'm going to mute everybody again here just to control the chit-chatting. It's time for our presentation on painting. And you're not going to believe some of the stuff you see. I would suggest that each of you go to the speaker view up there in the upper right-hand corner. There you have a way of choosing what view you have. With the speaker view, you'll be able to see the one and only person talking at the time and have the full screen for his presentation. So with that, we're going to go to how to paint your Comanche. And it was going to, yeah, you all have the opportunity to unmute if you want, but each of you will have to do it because I just muted everybody.
And it gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce Luke Strawbridge. So Luke and I met at Sun and Fun Holiday Fly-In. And just a quick intro that Luke's been painting airplanes since he was in high school. Took about a 3-year break to be a cardiac ward nurse, and then realized his real passion was painting Comanches, rather painting aircraft. And it's a remarkably complex and really fascinating area. So we are looking forward to Luke's prezo. Luke will end up needing to unmute, and then Pete will need to enable screen sharing. Looking forward to it. Thanks, and Luke, appreciate your joining us tonight.
I'm happy to be here.
Okay, you're on.
All right. So I've been doing this, like CJ said, since I was in high school. I got into it because I needed a job. Didn't know, had no idea what I was doing. I thought it was I think it's a great story. My boss handed me some sandpaper and a DA, which is a device you use when sanding. First airplane I ever worked on was a Hawker 800, and told me to sand it. And I sanded the entire airplane in one day. I didn't get anything done, but I sanded the entire airplane in one day. And so I continued to work there. I got the job because I was interested in trying to go to New Zealand when I graduated high school. And I worked there, ended up working until 2008 when the economy crashed and I got a job. At that point, I went to school for nursing, got a job working at the hospital, spent 3 years roughly there. I realized it's not what I wanted to do, went back to aircraft and realized I really enjoyed it. Thought it was really fun and neat. And so as I got more involved and more interested, I talked to my boss and I said, you know, if I start a business painting small aircraft, because he was doing jets at the time, would you be interested in sending me some planes? He said yes. It took me 2 years from that point to find a place to open up my business. And when I did, I opened up with a RV12 and a Bonanza outside the door of my paint shop, courtesy of my boss. And I have a great relationship with him to this day. So there are a lot of important details when getting your aircraft painted that you want to keep in mind. And I think the best thing I can do is sort of take you through our process. This has been a learning experience for me. I have learned a lot from CJ and others recently about Comanches. Every airplane is unique, and I think it's very interesting because as much as I've learned, I have so much more to learn. And I think that's something you probably want to look for and who you're taking your aircraft to, but you've got to be open to learning, and this has been a neat experience. So I'm going to open up a slideshow and just kind of go through each step of the process that we do when painting your aircraft. I'm a little bit out of order there, I apologize. So corrosion prevention really begins at the very first process. When the aircraft comes in, control surfaces are removed, wingtips are removed, as you see here, plastics, fiberglass, and really any access to the aircraft inside of the wings, anything like that, ought to be covered up properly. It's extremely important that when you're having your aircraft stripped, the stripper gets where you want it to go, and it doesn't get where you don't want it to go. You'll hear sort of horror stories about people having stripper that was left behind their access panels and wasn't treated properly, or got into the wings and wasn't removed. And that's where corrosion comes from. And I believe from what I've learned even more recently, this is going to be more important with Comanches because you guys have aircraft that were zinc chromated inside and out. You want to protect what you're not stripping. And so you can see here, we cover up everything we can with foil paper, foil tape, and plastic. This is just another picture. Another area people are often concerned about are the windows. And so we do 3 layers of protection. There's a layer of foil tape, and then the foil paper, and then another layer of foil tape. And I grew up in a construction family. And so when you're roofing a house, when you're putting the tiles on, you use the technique so that it's not going to get underneath the tile underneath it. We use the same technique when we're covering up windows for aircraft. And I may jinx myself, but I've been doing this since 2003, and I have not burnt a window yet. You also want to leave a little bit of room around the windows. You'll see there's about, you see this here, roughly an inch, half inch at least, but I like to do at least an inch or 3/4 inch overlap, just to secure that the windows are in good shape and there's nothing to be concerned about there. Here you can see the stripper as it's on the airplane. And this is a great, this is a Cherokee 180, but this is something that I've learned working in the industry. Pipers that were made before 1978 were painted with lacquer paint. The chemical that they allow us to use for stripping aircraft now, if we want to be friends with the EPA, and we do, is a peroxide base, chemically neutral, so it's not acidic or basic stripper. And there are advantages to that. It's nice, rinses off easily with water. It doesn't like lacquer paint. And when you're at this stage of the painting process, you'll notice these areas here, this area of the engine cowling, those areas have been repainted. And it's obvious at this point, once you've got stripper on there, because these areas aren't stripping the same. This area, you can see it's kind of bubbling up a little bit more. This airplane has lacquer paint. when an aircraft has lacquer paint, and we'll see this as we get to the next step of the process, it creates more work for the paint shop. We try to be very upfront about that when we talk about painting Piper aircraft. I try to figure out when it was painted last and let the customers know up front that there may be an increased expense in removing lacquer paint. This is just another example. You have an area here that has been repainted. I apologize. And then you can see how it's sort of just sagging off there. That is the lacquer gumming up. And when you get to the point to where you're stripping it, you see all the remaining paint that's actually on the aircraft. And what's interesting about this, we'll really see it when we get to the bottom of the wings, is that you can see there are areas where it's been resprayed. But on the bottom of the wings, what you really see, I believe it's the next picture right here, this area here, somebody worked on this aircraft, repainted at least the top of the wings, and from stripping it, I believe they painted the entire airplane, but they only stripped the tops of the wings, probably because they realized that it was lacquer and they didn't want to put the effort into it. So you see here where the paint has come off, as opposed to here where you have this streaking of gummed up lacquer paint. And for your paint shop, that's going to create more work. That has to be removed mechanically. And so the removal of that's going to take more time. It's also important that it's done properly. One of the things you'll notice about these pictures here, where you see the work that's been done when it's in metal prep, your plane is going to spend probably the longest amount of time that it's down in metal prep when it's being painted. And so you'll notice that the rivets don't look the same as the rest of the aircraft. And there's a reason for that. I also think this is an interesting photo because you can see that this piece of metal right here has clearly been replaced. It is clearly a different piece of metal from the rest of the aircraft. So what we do on rivet lines, we use 3M Rivet Cleaning disc, which is basically 3M has put together 5 Scotch-Brite pads, cut them into a circle, and set them up so that you can put them on a grinder. Now, you have to be skilled and know how to use them to not destroy your rivets, but when you're doing that kind of work, you've got to clean all that paint around those rivets. That's the best tool. I know some people use wire wheels, steel wire wheels, and brass wire wheels. I would strongly recommend against that for 2 reasons. You have dissimilar metals, and when we get to the corrosion pictures that I'll show later, you'll see what dissimilar metals do. It also scars the metal. It's not obvious necessarily, although you will see it if you know it's there. It looks kind of fuzzy is the way I describe it. But steel, particularly, brass is a little bit softer, but brass also has a higher dissimilar metal rating to aluminum. It's doing damage. It's creating scarring. And if you keep doing that over and over again, you're going to have long-term issues. So we do everything we can, you can see here, to prevent using anything that might damage when cleaning up around the rivets at this stage in the process. The next stage, which is possibly the most important, is a good picture of it. This is acid etch and iodine. You etch the metal with acid etch to clean it, and it opens up the metal. Both of those steps are important. When you're cleaning the metal, it provides a clean surface for the iodine to go on. We aren't allowed to use zinc chromate anymore. We use epoxy chromate primers, but this is an important step for protecting your metal from corrosion. The iodine, and you'll read about this often, it promotes adhesion for the primer and the paint, but the iodine also serves as your metal. It serves as your heavy metal for protection. At one step of that. The second step is the epoxy chromate primer. And so this is an immensely important stage for a couple of reasons. it's easy to miss at this point. A lot of times you'll notice on aircraft corrosion coming from around lap lines, places where oils are coming out. And I attribute a lot of that to people rushing through this stage. When we acid etch the airplane, you rinse it off and you see where the water beads up. And where water is beading up, that means there's still oil on the aircraft. If you don't get that oil off, the iodine is not going to adhere properly at that point. And if that doesn't happen, you don't have the proper protection that you want from the iodine. Some people say, well, the paint chips. Sure, you got paint peeling problems, and that's an issue that's important. But the real issue is you haven't protected your metal. It's an important step to really take the time to do right. And when it doesn't go right, when you rinse the airplane and you see places where the water is beating up, you have to redo it. You've got to do it right. It's an important step. And so you may have to put more chemicals into it. You may have to pay more for more acid etch, but it's important to do that right. And when I say that on the aircraft painters end. I am not comfortable with moving forward with the project if the acid etch doesn't go right. And so it's important to do this step properly and make sure the iodine goes properly. There's another issue. Acid etch and iodine are water-based. So the iodine goes on, you rinse it off. It's important that you dry the aircraft properly. And so, you know, if it's a nice sunny day in Florida, it's nice to be able to stick it out for 2 hours to bake in the sun. But you have a 24-hour period when you want to get your primer on. That is the most important time period. The technical data sheet for the conversion coating we use allows for 48 hours. We do our best to do everything within 24. The recommended time is 24 hours, but you want to give it enough time to properly dry out. And so it's an immensely important stage. One of the things you're doing when you're painting aircraft is you're dealing with chemicals. I happen to really like chemistry. I think it's really interesting. I enjoy this part of the job, but it needs to be done properly. And so you can see here the gold tone that it puts the aluminum. The next step that is immensely important is primer. And so when you get to primer, we use Sherwin-Williams products through from every step, and we don't cut the corners on activators, hardeners, and reducers. It's easy, or it sounds nice. You can get some cheaper activators, some cheaper hardeners, and some cheaper reducers, but you don't get the consistency you get. And I believe there's a reason that Sherwin-Williams makes the products they do. And so we use a high solid aerospace epoxy chromate primer. It's important to get good coverage over everything. I think you can even see in this photo, we make great effort to spray up well in the wells. You want to cover everything. We warranty all of our work, and I think good paint shops should, because you want to do the job properly. And what we do, we use a prime direct to paint process. This means when we get to the stage where we're priming, the plane really needs to be ready to paint. We really need to do things right. It really needs to be prepped properly up to this point. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult. You have to do a better job priming. The primer needs to go on slick if you want the paint to go on slick. But one of the reasons we use that process is because the other options are to prime it and sand it. And when you sand it, you always risk burning through the primer. And when you burn through the primer, it only takes a half a second to burn through that aluminum or that iodine coating that we put on to protect the aluminum. You've sort of defeated the purpose of what you've just done. And so it makes it a little bit harder for the painter. But I feel like it is the right choice. And we've had a good experience with this at this point to not break our primer surface. The areas that you break through typically are where there are lap lines, anywhere where there's a change. If there's a roll in the metal, that's where it's easy to burn through. And we don't like burning through our primer. We like what it offers as far as protection. And I like to be able to guarantee all my paint jobs. So here's a picture. So we prime and we go straight to paint. This is a single stage paint. We use Sherwin-Williams Jet Glow Express. We love this paint. I've used many different paints over the years. Jet Glow Express is not a requirement for small aircraft. It is technically an aircraft paint designed for jets, but it has a beautiful sheen. It's got a great hold up. It is made to last. And one of the things that's so beautiful, one of the biggest advancements in painting since I've been working in this industry is chemical advancements. So we're a small shop. I have not been able to build the $2 million paint booth that I would like to build, and God willing, maybe someday I will. This paint has 7 different activators, 5 different reducers. And what that allows us to do is to mix the paint to what our atmosphere is. So we have a hydrometer in the paint booth. We check the temperature every time when we go in, and we have charts, and we chart everything. And so there is a activator A07. You can use that when it's 42 degrees out. It's unbelievable. As well as there's a high humidity, high temperature, and you can mix the activators. And so what we have done is over time, we've charted all the information, all of our activators, what we use, we chart the temperature. So when I go in to paint an airplane, I chart how much paint I mixed, how much I used, how long it took me to do a coat. And then I can go in there and I can pull up my chart and I look at it and I can say, all right, it's 65 degrees out, humidity's 30%. I'm going to use AO5 for the first 2 coats, and on the final coat, I'm going to do AO5 with a cut of AO2, 50%, and I'm going to get the finish that I want. And we've been able to produce a consistent product doing that. And especially in Florida, it's been a great advance in painting for us. So you can see this is a single stage. You get great sheen out of it. I like this picture here because of what it shows right here on the nose pant. That area right there, that darker area that you see from the crack, that's not just a crack in the resin. That's what I call rotting. And what happens is your fiberglass splits there, and then oil or dirt or moisture gets in there, and it softens the glass over time. So if you've ever pushed on a piece of fiberglass and felt that it's soft, that's what's happening. And to repair it properly, what you need to do is actually cut that out and do a real repair. So you end up doing a fix probably about that big. We do a lot of fiberglass work. We didn't get great photos of the work on this. I wish we had, but I do have the finished photo there. So once you've got the paint on there, we usually like to go through this process beforehand, but it's important to go through the stripe design. And this is really neat because this is a 3-way call with myself, the customer, and the designer. And they can pull this up. So they could be looking at this on their computer. I'm looking at it on my computer. And we're talking with the designer as well. And what he's doing is he is tweaking the design, both to the satisfaction of the customer, as well as this design is in the second dimension. And as it turns out, aircraft are in the third dimension. It never looks the same on a flat piece of paper as it does in real life. And so I'm able to give my opinion on things, trying to avoid things like door handles, trying to avoid hinges. You want the design to look as much like the photo that's produced as you possibly can. And so that takes time and effort. And so this is a great opportunity. This usually takes a couple of hours, and sometimes it can take a couple of days to get it right. But you take the time to do it, and the final product is always satisfying. So this is what the drawing looks like when it's finished. This is just a couple of things that I will recommend, and I recommend them because if it was my airplane, I would want it this way. You'll notice that we don't run, we keep the control surfaces one color. The reason being, especially ailerons, elevators, and rudders, they have to be removed and rebalanced every time they're painted, or they ought to be. And so if you've got more colors on there, every color you add, I would estimate roughly $500 to $1,000 extra to get it done. And so you save yourself trouble down the road if you do need to do any rework on your aircraft. And so I try to think about those things and encourage those things. I think you can make slick looking, nice designs without running into that. So once we have the stripe design, we use a paint mask. The same man who works on the design will print up a mask for us. And you can see here, this is the paint mask laid out on the aircraft. One of the things you'll notice is these areas here where there's this orange fine line tape that's laid out by hand. The reason for that is because the 2D paint mask never lays out perfectly on a 3D aircraft. You need to be able to make the adjustments where it needs to be made. And it's often where, you know, you have sharp angles and flat areas right here on this Cherokee 180. And so what happens visually, if you don't make those adjustments, it looks like the stripe is changing, even if it's not. And so to be able to identify that and fix that takes time. And you need to be able to do that by hand. So paint masks are wonderful. I love paint masks. They've saved me an immense amount of time, but it doesn't remove the art of being able to lay out. I remember this took me longer to master than anything else in painting. And when I learned how to do it at the time, the highest paid floor workers, so to speak, at Falcon Jet in St. Louis were the people who could lay out stripes. It takes a certain gift and time and patience, lots of patience. So once we get the design on there, you'll notice here, we do our best to avoid, like I said, running into the hinges. This stripe you'll see in the finished product runs under the door hinge. So the door's all one, the door handle's all one color. Once again, you have your sharp angles here. And so that's why you have your fine line laid out by hand there. And there are things that the paint mask does beautifully. I mean, the detail of this tiny stripe there is really wonderful. So you cover up the aircraft, you prepare for the painting of the next color, which pretty straightforward. Once again, when dealing with that step, I don't know why, but people like to sand rivets. You don't need to sand the rivets at that point. You can take a Scotch-Brite by hand and Scotch-Brite around the rivets. There's no need to, and there really should be when you're getting your airplane painted, no risk for your rivets. This airplane is a fun example. Typically, we're able to paint the end numbers at the same time as the stripes. This one, because of the choice of design and where the stripes and the color of the end numbers, we actually had to paint the first stripe color and then introduce the end numbers. So we buy a paint mask for the end numbers. You can see here, you've got the numbers themselves and then the shadow. And so what you can do as you're working on this, you pull the end number out, it's just like a stencil. You paint the end number, and then you cover the end number up, and you pull the shadow out, and you paint the shadow. We used to do that by hand back in the day, and these stencils are great. I love them. It's enabled me to teach many people to be able to do end numbers. This is introducing the stripe design to the tail because of the scheme design. You can see that once again, this is a single stage paint, and the sheen that it offers, I think, is wonderful. We've removed the stripe there for the next color. So we'll have to cover up all this. This is where the silver striping will go. Got to remove the front half of it still there, but the plane is still covered up. That's after we've put the silver on. We've got to shoot the white, and then you can see the white there on the plane. We include door jambs on all of our paint jobs. We like to try and make it look as much like a brand new aircraft as we can. And so at this stage, we do the door jambs. And the reason we wait to do the door jambs, we like to use an airbrush gun or a touch-up gun. We cover up the entire interior of the aircraft, but the pressure at which we're spraying those stripes is anywhere from 30 to 60 pounds of pressure at the gun. And I don't want to risk blowing paint into anybody's airplane. When we're doing the door jambs, we can use a touch-up gun. You can spray it at 10 to 20 pounds of pressure, and it will look fine. Touch-up guns have a tiny needle, about a 1.0 needle. And so you can do that, get the product that you want, and lower your risk of, you know, having a lot of rework to do. At this point, we begin to put the aircraft back together. You can see this person chose to have new wheel-in lights put in. This is a good time to do that. We have an IMPIA who works with us. And so when we do this kind of stuff, we can do these things. We can do it in conjunction with paint. So we can do it without ruining our paint job. We care a lot about our paint. We want it to look nice. You can see there, we installed that beacon as well. So this is the final stages of the product. Everything's been painted. I think it shows well. You see the reflection on this photo coming off the wing. You want aircraft to pop like this as a painter. You want it to look that way. Once again, this is a single stage. We can talk about the advantages and disadvantages of base clear. We do base clear as well. The single stage is a great option though. So everything that we do, all the reinstall, everything that you get done on your airplane, every piece of fiberglass we fix, we do logbook entries. Everything is reinstalled to FAA standards according to maintenance manuals. And you want that. I want that as a painter. When I work on a plane with a good logbook entry, it is so much easier to deal with. When people give you sort of questionable information, airplanes that are stripped well, prepped well, and painted well, not only is it going to last longer, not only is it going to look good longer, it's going to be easier down the road in every step of the process. We do a lot of touch-up work, and touching up work from aircraft that are painted properly is going to be less expensive. They have all the information about your paint in your logbook. I don't have to guess what paint it is. I don't have to go out and get a camera match. Cameras aren't perfect, and the matches they get certainly aren't perfect. if you don't have logbook entries for your paint, we get a camera match. They charge us for a pint of paint. We spray a panel. It doesn't match. We send out, they give another match. It's just a lot of work. Adds time to your downtime on your touch-up jobs. I love painters who do things properly. I love information. The more knowledge I can get, the better. And so that's huge. So I've got some pictures here, some horror stories from some other aircraft we worked on. I get phone calls from people who are interested in buying airplanes, and they tell me, I got a cheap airplane, just needs a paint job. I've never met a cheap airplane that just needed a paint job. When we went to work on this Cardinal, when we went to strip it, all this, everything you see on here, that's hail damage. That's hail damage. Oh, sorry about that. That's time. I mean, between this and that, we had 40 hours of labor. It wasn't deep enough. We were able to use a lightweight filler to fill it and treat it properly. We left it up to the customer if they wanted us to deal with it, although I don't know who wouldn't. But when you have hail damage like that, it wasn't clear before the aircraft was stripped. And when it was stripped, that shows up. It's not an exciting thing to find, but you find it quite often in the cheap aircraft. We make logbook entries for everything we do. And I would want to know that. I would want to know that if I was an aircraft owner, and I'd want to know that if I was an aircraft painter, if I was a mechanic. I think this is the kind of information you would want to know. What filler you use matters. And one step that we like to do over the filler that we use, we like to put a metal glaze, a seal of some kind. Things that aren't filled properly will have a higher chance of creating corrosion underneath. One thing I will say about this is that all of this was treated properly. We didn't find any corrosion under any of that. I'm on fire right now. And that's great. I mean, that was great news. Here's another example of just finding bodywork when you strip an aircraft. That's on an engine cowling. The nice thing about this is back in the day, they like to use 8 pounds of Bondo to fill a small ding. We probably put an 1/8 of the amount of bodywork back in there, of filler in there to fill those dings. People were a little bit free with their filler back in the day. And so just because you see this doesn't mean that the ding and damage is as bad as it looks. We like to remove all of the bodywork first and show it to the customer so they can see what we're really dealing with. Sometimes what looks like a horror story is really just small dings. I have some pictures of corrosion here. And the reason I want to show these, well, corrosion's a big deal, but if you see corrosion right next to a patch that has already been done on an aircraft, it's usually a red flag, because this patch over here had been done to take care of this corrosion issue, and it didn't. They removed the corrosion here, put a patch over it, and then the corrosion starts here. This is just another picture. You can see corrosion down here. Well, we took the engine cowling off on this one, and we found there was a rib piece of metal that somebody had put in here underneath, running along there. All of the corrosion was coming from the inside out. So by the time this corrosion here was showing up, it was coming from the inside out. It was already basically a hole. Ended up having to patch a section from about there to repair it properly. And the most dangerous corrosion that we have come across has been corrosion coming from the inside. And when you see corrosion, for example, this right here is on a Bonanza engine cowling. And you may notice that the metal's bulging a little bit right here around these welds. And you might see here it's bulging as well. But when you get to this piece, you can see there's a rib behind that. All the way along that section, the corrosion started with the rib. This rib had not been treated properly. Corrosion was coming from the inside out. And so what looks like minor cracking or things that may be easy to deal with, it's not always the case. I did a 182 for a man who bought a 182 for cheap. And I tried to warn him, and he brought it to me, and he had some corrosion on the side of the aircraft. And when we got to it, we took some interior panels off because we had some concerns. And he had holes coming from the inside out because his interior had gotten wet, and that was corroding inside and out. He ended up spending close to as much on repairing the metal on his aircraft as he did on the paint job. This is corrosion on the bottom of a Seneca. And once again, it looks like surface corrosion, but we had some concerns. There's a hole here. There's another hole over here. So we got into the aircraft. We pulled up the carpet, and he had carpet soaking in there, actually insulation under the carpet, for we don't know how long. It had been coming in from the windshield. And he had holes. We ended up replacing this entire panel right here. And once again, it's corrosion sneaking in from the inside. My biggest concern when I'm looking at corrosion is identifying what's actually causing it. So here is a great example of dissimilar metals. And this is just stainless steel screws. Almost everybody's seen it on their inspection panels. What happens is you tighten those screws, you break that seal between the paint and the primer and the metal, and it creates corrosion. You got a little bit, you can even see it actually right here spreading off of the panel. We deal with this stuff all the time. There's an unbelievably simple solution. And what we do is we put nylon washers behind the stainless. The other option is to use zinced screws. Don't go stainless. And either one of those is a legitimate option. Some people don't like the nylon washer option because you can't rely on people putting the nylon washers back on. And I understand that. You can buy a bucket of nylon washers for pennies. So if you want to continue to go with the stainless look, just keep nylon washers around. Check on your inspection panels. It's a simple solution. And I just have this picture here because I think this is what a good patch looks like. A patch like that, as a painter, we'll record it. It'll be in your logbook. But when I paint your airplane, you won't see it. I can make that disappear. And, you know, it's good to know it's there. I think as honest people, we want to know that stuff's there. But that's a good patch. It's easy to work with as a painter. We have a sheet metal guy we work with, and we love him because, well, first time I gave him an engine cowling to do and picked it up, not only did he come in under cost, he also sent me 3 text messages asking if he could do anything better. Thought this is the greatest guy in the world. We'll work with him forever. So with that, I've covered most of the process. I think it's a good time to open up to, I'm not sure how to stop. Oh, there we go. To discussion, questions, things that come up. I'm sure I breezed over things that I need to speak about. I talk about it so much, I forget. So.
First off, where's your shop and what's it name? Oh, the name, sorry.
I do that. I forget to tell people. We're Ace Aircraft Painting and we're in Bartow, Florida. So we deal with a lot of corrosion.
Bartow, Florida. Okay.
Yes.
Say that again. It was Ace Painting?
Ace Aircraft Painting, yes, sir.
Oh, Ace Aircraft, got it.
I had a sign to stick behind myself, but I'm not technologically advanced enough, so it came in backwards and I said, forget it.
Got it. Okay.
This is CJ. I'm gonna grab a couple. Oh, go ahead.
What wax would you recommend using or not using on a standard airplane paint?
Well, that's a good question. I hadn't really heard much one way or the other, and I started reading more about that just out of interest. And I hear both sides of the story. I hear that wax is not good for aircraft paint. I've never heard that before until I started reading more recently about it. My experience has been, you know, I encourage people usually, if they're really concerned, to wax it about once every 6 months. You don't want to over wax. If you keep waxing it, you'll end up giving you'll increase the chances, or you'll increase the process of the paint oxidizing, despite popular belief. But I don't have an actual wax recommendation. I have started using and looking into some of the new stuff that everybody's talking about. Why can't I remember?
Ceramic.
The ceramic, yes, sir, thank you. So we've done some ceramic on a couple of aircraft, and it's one that I did was a lake amphibious aircraft, and what I did is I did the bottom of the fuselage, because if anything's going to take a beating, it's the bottom of the fuselage of a lake. And it's been on there about a year, and it looks good. Now, if it does what it says it's supposed to do, we paid $100 for 6 ounces. And the 6 ounces, you would probably just in material need to get to do an entire aircraft, probably be spending about $600 or so. And it's immensely important that you do it properly. I was able to do it on a freshly painted airplane because I happened to have freshly painted it. The cleaning process that goes into it, it creates a seal. And when it does, the seal, from what I read, the only way to remove it is to sand it off. And so what you seal in, you seal in. Every imperfection is there. So there's a reason that if you're going to get a ceramic coating done, don't go to the cheapest guy. You want to go to somebody who really knows what they're doing. You want to ask them about their process of cleaning the airplane. How do they clean it? What do they use? And I'd take some time to think about that, because I have seen some jobs that were done, and it also creates trouble for the painter down the road sometimes. If things aren't done properly, you spray the stripper on there and the stripper slides right off, it's the beginning of a bad day. Yeah, so touch-up job.
I'm going to grab a couple of the questions from, this is CJ, I'm going to grab a couple of the questions in the chat window before we open broadly, just because kind of people that were patient enough to type in. Mike Newman had a really interesting question. What do you do underneath the antennas?
Underneath the antennas? That's a good question. One thing I'll tell you is good paint shops don't paint antennas. If your antennas are in rough shape and you're worried about it, you probably need to replace them. Some antennas we remove, and when you remove them, you just treat them. Some of them, you know, you have to have the contact. Some people, I've seen people remove the antennas and then paint over everything. And then of course, when you put your antenna back on, you got nothing. but we try to live by if there's no issue going on there, then don't make a mess of it. Things are in good shape. Don't get into it. If there's no corrosion coming out from underneath it, if the antennas are in good shape, if the seal's still good, if the customer says they're not having issues with leaking or anything, we often leave them alone. We do treat, and we are there to treat corrosion and things like that. But
Mike,
sorry, go ahead.
no, keep going. I was just going to ask Mike if he may have had a particular reason for asking that question, but I didn't realize I was interrupting you.
Yes,
well,
CJ, Mike Newman here. Yes, my question was, I recently painted my airplane and I took all the antennas off. I noticed that on yours that you weren't not taking the antennas off and you were masking them, painting around them. And I just wondered what that does in the future if you ever want to move an antenna or eliminate an antenna. How do you deal with that?
That's a good question. And to be completely honest with you, the removal of antennas has been a question that's come up more recently, even in my painting career. And so I'll be honest, the guy I learned from wouldn't remove an antenna if you paid him $90 million. He was afraid of messing anything up. And so I'm learning. And I was talking to my mechanic about it. I mean, here's a great example. One of the hardest things to paint on a Bonanza is the bottom lip of the lower cowling. And my mechanic looked at me like I was the dumbest person to walk the face of the earth. He said, I can take this prop off and reinstall it all according to code in an hour. And I've been trying to figure out how to paint around it my entire life. And I am constantly learning. And so we've become more aware of what we can and can't remove, but I don't mess with things that I'm not 100% confident. I'm not going to do anything that I don't know I'm doing a good job and doing it right. And so we slowly learned what we're more comfortable with and what we're not. And it's a great experience. I mean, I really am still learning what to do and what not to. I am a painter, I'm not a mechanic. And I tell people that all the time. And I rely heavily on my mechanic, and I've learned a lot from him because of that.
Okay, well, and one other comment I had about or question actually, about the ceramic. I've been told that ceramic wax makes it very difficult to touch up because you cannot remove it. And if you go to try to touch up a paint or repair a paint job that has been ceramic wax, you cannot do it. Is that true?
I have not had to do a repair on a ceramic yet, but what I have read and that sounds very true. One of the problems you have with the ceramic is that it's actually a seal. It's not just a regular wax. And so when you put it on, they'll tell you, if you buy the right stuff, if you buy the real stuff, you have to sand it off with at least 1500 grit paper. And if you're doing that, you are removing something that's actually sealing to the aircraft. Mm-hmm. And so it would make sense when I'm dealing with touch-up jobs, the biggest thing aside from paint match is what chemical is on your airplane. Because man, you get into some stuff. We had a Navajo. Whew, that was a nightmare. He had somebody wax that. I think he just sprayed his airplane with silicone. That's what I think he did. I think he did it and brought it to us to torture me. And so the experience of getting that silicone off, getting the paint touch up to come out properly, it's a challenge.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is, you're going to love this, and this gets into some of the group buy discussions we had, but average cost to paint our Comanches, and you might want to answer this as a one and then a many.
Sure. Well, I guess you haven't put up the offer yet.
No, not yet. But I will take a moment just to let everybody know that the reason that the invite said come and bring your favorite paint shops is, and Luke, forgive me, but a couple of years ago when we really discovered we had a bad need for shoulder harnesses in the fleet because
basically there were very few Comanches that had factory installed shoulder harnesses due to the era. We began the era of the group buy special for Comanches. And one of the fascinating discoveries when Luke and I were discussing whether this Comanche Zoom would be possible was that I had assumed a way to make a paint job more efficient. And then as we started discussing the business process of painting an airplane, it became clear that there were ways to make it more efficient and that we could both help our paint shops and help ourselves as owners of a common type. And so I'm going to say that as a teaser until Luke and I finish working out the details. And Luke, I apologize for stepping in. Over to you.
Oh, no, that's fine. And you know, there's a couple of things I mean, the process of painting, it takes time. I think I forgot to mention that, and I should mention it. Our estimated time for a complete strip and paint is 6 to 8 weeks. And I've got a shop. I started out by myself. I painted a King Air F90 by myself in 8 weeks. I didn't see anybody for 8 weeks. But and you don't even want to know how little I did it for. But now I've got 8 people working for me, which is huge. Having people working for you, especially, you know, we're doing multiple aircraft at a time. You've got to do the job right. You have to have people you can trust. You have to learn to delegate. It's been interesting. I've really had to learn how to manage a business as well as continue to produce a product that I am happy with. And that includes training people. I don't like hiring people who already think they know what they're doing. I love hiring young guys, you know, 18, 20 years old. They're interested in painting aircraft, but they've never done anything before. The worst is a guy who comes in and knows how to do everything and sands the rivets right off of an airplane. So it takes time. It takes time to do it right. You want to be patient with how things go. And as a painter and as a business owner, one of the hardest things to do, but it's the right thing to do, is if you need another week, ask for another week. And I always try to tell people up front, you know, if I ask you for another week, you won't regret leaving your airplane for another week in the long run. If you pick it up a week early, both of us are going to be unhappy. I want to produce an airplane. I want to paint planes that don't need to be painted. If I paint your airplane, I don't want to have to see you again unless you decide you want to change your paint scheme or you bought a new airplane. And so for me, that really means doing everything right all the way along. It's a detailed process, every step. And if you skip foiling up, so you miss a entry point into the wing, you've created problems in the future. I'd rather take the time to go back and check everything over. I don't get to do every step of the process anymore. I paint a lot. I love painting, but I do check over almost every step of the process all the time. And I've got a guy on the floor that I've trained up, and he is great. And you have to have people like that. And so just, you know, running a business and trying to continue to do things right, I'm gonna always ask for time if I need it. And I would, you know, I don't care who you take it to. If your painter asks for more time,
give it to him.
Yeah, and unless he's had it for 14 months. I read some horror stories today because I was just kind of interested, and I read about a guy who his airplane had been down for 14 months, and I don't know what happened in 14 months. That's pretty crazy. But be gracious, and I try to be gracious and understanding on my end, because I know people love their airplanes and they want them back. So I've heard some stuff, and I've done some research on this. Somebody asked about dark schemes noticeably heavier than the equivalent white paint. I'm a bit of a dork. I like to measure things out. I weigh the gallons of paint when they come in out of interest to learn. Basically, every single gallon of paint that comes in weighs 8 pounds. Weighs about the same as a gallon of milk. When you spray it, 45% of what you spray evaporates off. So when you're painting, and that includes the total cure time. So 45% of each gallon ends up on the aircraft. For a Cherokee, which would be similar to a Comanche, we use about 4.5 to 5 gallons of white sprayable. So you gain roughly somewhere between 16 to 20 pounds. Stripes, we do about a quart per stripe. So it's a negligible amount, but it comes out to, so then if it's 4.5, you really hit that full 20, you might hit 22 in weight. If you go with a two-tone, you'll get a little bit more. So that aircraft that I went through the process with, that was a two-tone. There's more sanding involved, more paints removed as it's added in that process. But you'll roughly end up around 25 pounds extra weight.
I had a quick question, just as far as, I guess, the process of, if you had an airplane where you wanted to do the interior and then you want to do the paint, you might have a few mechanical issues or stuff, but, obviously you would take care of the mechanical things. But as far as, would you recommend that you do the paint last, versus, get the interior done, then do the paint, so that vice versa, so that, hey, people aren't stepping on your paint or making, as they're redoing your brand new upholstery, they just nick your brand new paint job,
Yeah. We work with some interior shops, and what we do is, so we work with Duncan Aviation out of Lakeland often. And what we'll do is the customer will fly their plane to Duncan. He'll remove the interior, except for what they need to fly to us. And then they'll fly to us and we'll work on it. And then he'll take it back and he'll install the interior. It all depends on how much you trust your interior guy. Good interior guys, I love working with. It's great. That way your plane's only down for 8 weeks and both jobs are done, right?
Right.
Customer's happy. We get to work together. You see a brand new look. Nothing's cooler than seeing like a totally refinished aircraft. Maintenance depends on what's being done. I always have a little bit of a cringe moment when people are like, as soon as you're done with it, I'm taking it to my mechanic for an annual. And I'm like, no, I hope it doesn't scratch it. But we work with a lot of mechanics as well. And so if somebody wants to replace their windows, what we'll recommend is they bring it to us to strip first, then go, if they're working with a mechanic on the field, and have the windows removed and replaced then. It's easier for the mechanic. At least that's what they tell me. I don't know if that's true, but that's what they tell me. And so it kind of depends on what you're doing, what you're looking to get done. We do repair, fit fiberglass pieces and plastics, so that can obviously be done during our process. But there's a lot of stuff. And then sheet metal, that's going to be an issue that often just comes up when the plane's getting painted. One thing I'll mention is I was reading in one article recently, somebody was talking about how the painter he was praising the painter because he fixed the dents in his aileron by putting body filler in it.
Oh,
don't do that. You're not supposed to do that. We won't do it. I'll lose paint jobs over it because we do things to FAA standards. I want to be doing this for as long as I'm capable of painting aircraft. And you want to do things right. You want to check the balance. I heard of another guy who never actually balanced a single flight control before he put it back on the aircraft. And it's not, obviously those airplanes are still flying, but there's the right way to do things, and then there's corners that you just don't cut. And maybe I'm a little bit too new school in that, but I like to do those things right. And simple stuff. I just bid out a paint job for a guy who had hail damage all over his 182, and he was going to have all ailerons, elevators, and rudder reskinned. And we told him up front, we got a great sheet metal guy who would do it for $2,900 materials and labor, and he does great work. And this guy's awesome. He primes and paints the insides. If he opens up your controls and there's not primer on the side, even he's not working on, he'll prime it. I love this guy. And so I think he's getting a steal of a deal at that price.
Absolutely.
But that's expensive. That's money, you know? And so I know it's hard. I know why people don't like that, but we're not going to fill you the dents on your control surfaces that need to be balanced.
I'm curious just on the physical aspect of process of painting, just because I have no idea. So when you say you mix, a hardener or a curer with it, I mean, do you paint the airplane and then you're painting it again with a hardener, or is that something you're actually mixing into the paint? I'm just curious as the physical process.
That's a great question. So when we paint an airplane, like when we go from primer to paint on that Cherokee, I get into work at 5 in the morning. I'm not done painting that airplane till 5 o'clock at night. It's a long process. Part of that is because you want to let that primer cure properly. So I get the primer on there as early as I can, but I'm going to let that primer sit for the recommended amount of time. There's the bare minimum, 2 hours, but I don't want the bare minimum. I want to produce the best job. So we let it sit. And then when you mix your paint, it's actually all mixed together in the paint before you paint it on.
Okay.
And so it's really one of the things I really enjoy, because my paint rep, I've been introduced to one of the head chemists who makes the paint for Sherwin-Williams, because when I told him we charted everything and that I like chemistry and I like mixing these paints and I've had all these experiences, like I had something go wrong one time and I called him to talk to him and I said, we've got all this information, I can't figure out what's going on, and I wasn't blaming him at all. And he was like, why do you, that's amazing that you guys do all this. And I was like, well, it just seems to make sense. I want to be able to produce properly every time. And so it's been really fun because I've learned so much. Like there's activator, hardener, and reducer. And you can over reduce a paint and make it look amazing. Problem is 3 years down the road, it's going to look like trash because an over reduced paint has no substance to it.
Mm.
You've reduced out all of the components that help it last. And so, and some of this stuff, I've learned from reading about, I've learned from talking to paint reps, I've learned from experience and learning and getting a better understanding of how the chemicals work. So my chemistry from college is not connecting with my brain right now, but there are different reactions you can get. And that's really what all your activators are based on. And so when you start to degrees using those things, it's really neat to see how it responds. And I can make a paint blister too if I want now. And so, and you learn like
that orange peel look.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I can give you that orange peel look if that's what you're going for.
On an orange airplane, I don't know.
But it's time and it's learning and it's been it's rework. I'm not going to let anything leave my shop. I mean, I say that if the owner demanded it, I can't do anything about it, but I'm not going to let anything leave my shop that I'm not happy with. And so it's hugely important to me. And this comes up a lot in touch-up jobs because people who want touch-up jobs done usually want them done yesterday. Can I drop my plane off tomorrow and pick it up last week? And I bid all touch-up jobs at 2 weeks now. Even if I think I can do it in 2 days, I say 2 weeks. For one, if I call you 2 days later and your airplane's done, you're happy. And for two, you just don't know what you're going to run into. And I don't want to be handing out work that I'm not happy with. That if somebody sees it, I don't want them saying I painted that. No, I can't do that. And so touch-up is an interesting industry, and we're getting a lot of that. And I've decided that maybe it's because we're the only people foolish enough to do it. But that also is key towards being upfront. Our shop rate, $95 an hour plus material cost. If I bid out a touch-up job on your aircraft and I tell you it's going to be 20 hours, I will not charge you more than 20 hours, even if I have to do more work than that to reach what I think the job should be. I will ask for more time if I think I need it. And if we come under our bid number of hours, we won't charge you for hours we didn't work. You know, we do a lot of work for a company. You said you flew an A4.
I did.
I painted an A4.
Oh, nice.
And
blue one, huh?
Well,
Blue.
No, I actually, well, no. I had a chance. I didn't want to ride in it. The thought doesn't appeal to me.
How did you keep your hands steady working on a jet fighter? Don't mess it up. Don't mess it up. Don't mess it up.
Well, it's not as different as you might think. But
not different, just intimidating when you've got the missiles pointing at you.
we made a lot of jokes about those. So we work for a company. I don't know. I had to sign all sorts of stuff, so I can't say anything about it. But we regularly strip A4s for them. And we just
like Birkin, or what is that? Draken?
I couldn't tell you if it was.
Yeah, only because they have A4s over at Lakeland. Yeah, it's a
civilian
company.
We come in under budget regularly, and I don't charge them more than what we estimated. Now I always try to estimate high, because I figure nobody's mad when you come in and say, hey, what I said was going to cost $4,000 only cost $2,500. People love that. And so, but I also know that sometimes it does cost $4,000. I try to give the worst scenario option when it comes to touch-up jobs. And I think what happens a lot of times with guys doing touch-up jobs is they get mad. I, for a short period, worked for a guy who will remain unnamed, and I watched him curse out a customer who came and said, that white's not the same white. And the guy, it wasn't. The guy was right. The owner, I stopped working for this guy because morally I couldn't continue to work for this guy. He had just picked a white that he had and painted it on his airplane. And when the customer came up and complained to him, he called the customer a liar.
Ooh.
And because he didn't want to do the job right, he probably did it for dirt cheap. He probably didn't charge the customer the right amount. He probably didn't give them real expectations. And you know,
how is he still in business?
Huh?
How on earth is he still in business if you got practices like that?
I don't know. I don't know. He's been in business for a long time too. It blows my mind.
Guess all of his customers are first-time customers.
Yeah.
Well, you'd be surprised.
It is a bit frightening. Luke, a quick question.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. No, that's all right. I'm going to just zip down these questions just because the folks that type them in
I know
have great questions. No, it's all good. To finish the second part of Adam's question, is it possible to have a deep, quote unquote, metallic pearl white without it just looking dirty or darker than normal white?
That's all a matter of which color you pick. And what you want when you pick a color like that is you want a test panel.
Say that again, a test peel?
A test panel.
Oh, yes.
So I'm working on an aircraft, an RV-14 right now. The owner because they all want car paint on their airplanes for some reason. Wanted a Corvette orange from 2015. So I sent the information to my paint guy, and he sent it off, and they got a match made, and they sent us panels of the color. I can get test panels. They made that paint just for us. And if I can't, I mean, I'm a small shop in Bartow, Florida. If I can get a test panel, anybody can get a test panel.
The reason I asked that was I was asking about a quote for a repaint. I wanted a plane painted in the TVR flip blue and purple and the pearl white, which is like a deep white with a metallic flake in it. And they said, mate, it's just gonna look dirty if you walk away from it. That's all. And they said not to do the pearl white. So.
Well, I mean, I guess it all depends on trusting the painter. I do trust painters. I will tell people if they pick a color that I think is not going to look like what they want.
Yeah, they told me to go for a gloss white, really bright gloss white, and then just have the metallic on the blue color, or bluey purple, and that would pop a lot more.
It will give it more pop. Depends on what you're going for. It's a good question. So pearls, if it's a real pearl, those are all 3-stage paints also. And so a real pearl has, they call it a sealer. Then you've got the pearl itself, and then you've got the clear. And there are no pearls that don't have clear over them. So it's what gives it that depth when you're looking at it. And one of the difficulties with pearls, just something to be aware of, is it's very difficult to match, even if you have the exact same paint. When we paint stuff like that, we'll keep track of pressure and everything when we're painting it. Because 3-step process, you don't want to have to repaint everything that's got that color on it to make it match. And so,
is that one where you also have to do all of that one when you do that one color, you have to do everything that's in that color at the same time? So if you've got like pinstriping in the same color and things, you have to do all of it at the same time to make sure you make it match. You
want to get everything in there if it's going on any part of the aircraft. So, and another thing you want to do is typically it's better to paint your light colors first. So get if you're doing pearl on there, you want to paint everything pearl basically. And the reason is that pearl's not going to cover over any dark paint if you get dark paint where you didn't want dark paint. It just doesn't cover. But that's not always 100% true. That's sort of a basic rule to keep.
So do you have to spend, if you've got a complex scheme, not just a nice simple swirl, if you've got a complex scheme, you have to spend like 2 days masking the damn thing so you get all the paint done in one, sweep across.
So did you see the presentation where it showed the paint mask up there?
Unfortunately not. I didn't realize that you guys have jumped forward an hour and we haven't.
So there's a combination there. We use paint masks. So our schemes are and I haven't talked about the base clear system. It's a different process. It's an interesting process. I'm not sure I buy into everything that I'm hearing about it these days, but I do believe so. But oh,
go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So when you're doing when you do like a base clear, it's a little bit more of a time crunch. You have 72 hours from when you paint the first color to when you want to get the last color cleared. Because you'd like to clear them all at the same time to eliminate how much you can feel the stripes. And so it makes for a bit of a rush. Get everything painted one color. Then, because you saw we had the airplane taken apart, get it put back together, get all the stripes laid out, get every color on there, and then get it painted, cleared. It's a little bit more of a rush. You end up using more paint typically on a base clear system because you end up using as much paint as you would have for your base coat, like your base white, to cover the entire aircraft. Usually by almost double, because you're also going to clear the entire aircraft. Now, my paint rep introduced me to something recently called a clear sealer, which makes so much sense. I can't believe that they didn't introduce this to us a long time ago. And what you can do with that is you can do that whole process where you rush through getting all the colors on there. Then you put the clear sealer on it. It covers up the stripe lines better than a paint does, because it kicks out faster. So it doesn't sag. It actually covers using surface tension. And you can sand that sealer, which is, you've already put less of that on than paint anyway. Take your time, get everything right, and then clear over that, and you don't have to use as much clear. So you can save yourself a decent bit of paint and weight on a base clear system going that route. I love it. We've just been introduced to it. I think it's the greatest thing as far as if you're going base clear.
Thank you.
And so just to try to, I'm going to try to move us along a little bit, just because we have a lot of questions and a lot of people need to take off at 9 in 10 minutes. Adam, did your question get answered?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, super. So an owner had somebody who painted his airplane prior to purchase without removing the paint underneath. How much extra weight is he probably carrying?
So, I mean, roughly, depending on what potential, depending on what design is on there, it's probably somewhere between 20 and 25 pounds. And the thing that would really concern me about that as a painter is, why did they do a scuff and paint? Because if you've got lacquer with polyurethane on the top, that's a nightmare for the next guy. And they don't really like each other that much. So your paint job's not going to last as long as you'd like anyway. We don't even offer scuff and paints anymore, because the amount of labor that goes into them really isn't that much different than a strip and paint. And I won't warranty that work because I don't know what the guy before me did. And so I'm definitely, I'm not a fan of scuff and paints. It's usually a sign of trying to cut corners.
Don, did you want to jump in at all, as that was your question? Anything more specific? You'll need to unmute. It's a great question.
It is.
And then just another question from Adam is it a bad idea to ceramic coat and polish a plane to temporarily make it look good until you repaint? Or too new to know?
The ceramic coat, I don't know enough about. It makes sense to me that you wouldn't want to be using it before. I'll tell you, like anything that's got silicone, I know the ceramic doesn't, but people will bring planes that they've been trying to extend the life on for quite a while, and they'll bring them in, and we can't even get tape to stick to them because they've got so many chemicals on the outside of their airplane. And so, you know, when I've got to spend 20 hours cleaning the chemicals off your airplane just so I can tape it up to strip it, I don't know how much life you got out of it, but that's what it looks like from our end.
Interesting. Yeah. Did the summer, go ahead, Rick, did you have a question that you wanted to jump in on? Okay. Another question, how long should we expect our single stage paint to last versus a base clear? And I know that's going to probably be, do you keep it inside or outside? Where does it live?
I know that's sort of how do I answer this question? So single stage I can speak to first. The guy I worked for only painted single stage for the longest time. I've seen airplanes that I painted 15 years ago with the same paint we're using now, and they look great. They're stored in hangars, and that's the biggest thing. If you really want to know how to take care of your airplane, keep it out of direct sunlight. Base clear was really originally developed for cars. I talked to my paint guy. It's really interesting talking to him about this because he said some things that I would find remotely embarrassing about my company. I can't believe he said them. I mean, he basically said, like, look, when we make car paints, we don't make them planning on them lasting more than 5 years. So don't tell him I said that. You never heard that from me. The attitude is completely different when they're making aircraft paint because they know. I mean, I work on airplanes I've painted half a dozen aircraft, more than that, probably painted a dozen aircraft that were made before 1950. I'm working on and off. This is really fun. I forgot about this. I'm working on a Grumman, a Goose that was made in 1941. That thing's got holes in it. Oh, man, that one's gonna be a lot of work. You want to talk about corrosion work? Oh man, we got our work ahead of us. It's probably gonna be about a 6-month project. But they know that when you paint an aircraft, they have to sell a product that's gonna last a long time. And so basically he told me, the biggest difference between aircraft and car paint is aircraft paint is tougher and it's flexible. It can move with temperature change and as metal moves, and so aircraft paint, it's made to be flown in the rain if painted properly at 180 miles an hour. It's made to hold up to that kind of stuff. And so what they've done is they've taken the basic concepts of the base clear for cars and they've developed it for aircraft. They've had to make some changes. So one of the things about aircraft paint is it's very difficult to cut and buff. That's when you wet sand it, all the way down to 6,000, and then you buff it to give it that perfect glassy look. You have to do it within the first 30 days that paint's on there. After that, you're buffing a rock with a woolly pad.
Wow.
And so it is made for aircraft. And they've really developed the clear coats so much better. I've tried to convince some of because I got guys mechanics that I work with, and they're like, clear coat comes off the airplanes. And I'm like, a lot of that is because they were painting car clears on airplanes before they had good aircraft clear. So it's still something. As far as the oldest aircraft clear I've seen has only been 7 years old. And it looked nice. It did. I was impressed with it. And I started using that clear because I thought, wow, I'm very impressed with this. But I haven't witnessed much older than that because the reality is it's only been being used or really been developed properly for about 20 years. And it's such a hard industry to break into as far as changing things are concerned. I mean, people don't want to change their ways.
Yeah. That's fascinating that the oldest aircraft clear is only 7 years old. So this base clear in aircraft with aircraft quality paint.
That's the oldest that I've seen on it. That's the oldest I've seen on a plane. So it was 7 years old on the plane. They've had clears for a while, but some of those were definite junk. I mean, I love Acroglow paint and their new stuff is great, but early Acroglow clear, I mean, I wouldn't paint that on your airplane if you paid me $1 million. I just feel bad. They've definitely gotten better.
Good stuff. From Peter, do the summer months with higher humidity present challenges in getting the desired finish, such as longer cure times?
Not anymore. That goes back to the chemicals that I can introduce into the paint now, the high humidity, the cool. I mean, just to give you an idea of how hot it is in Florida when you're painting in an oven, They have a activator that is intended for heated paint booths. And to get that finish that I like, I'll use the heated paint booth activator on the last coat in the summer on my paint jobs. And what that does is it just lets it flow out until it looks great, till it looks like you want it to look. And when you're doing that, you adjust how much you're reducing, you adjust, because if it's going to flow out longer, I actually reduce it less, because I don't want it to look like what I want it to look like when it's done. It's tricky. You have to learn these things. And so I love Jet Glow Express paint because it gives me so many options. And because I can deal with atmospheric issues. The one challenge that we have to calculate into our paint jobs that we can't control is drastic change. So if it's like 40% humidity in the morning, 80% humidity in the afternoon, you can't account for that. But that doesn't happen nearly as often as it used to.
And can you define cut and buff for people?
Okay. Cut and buff. So a cut and buff is, you can do it on a single stage, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's typically applied to a clear coat process. And what it is even after you clear over everything in a base clear system, you can still feel the edge of the stripes, and nothing looks perfect. I mean, everything looks really good, but you can't get that final absolute perfect glass look without cut and buff. And so what you do is you start with 1500 grit sandpaper and you wet sand it, and then you go to 2000, and then you go to 3000, and you do that over every cleared surface. You do that to remove the edge of the stripes. After that's done, you start with your buffer. You use a compound that's a cutting compound, and you start with a wool buffing pad, and you buff out all the standing scratches. Then you go back over it with a foam pad, a little bit softer. You use a swirl remover, and you remove the swirl mark. And then finally, you go back over it with a polishing pad, and you polish it. To get a cut and buff, and to get a cut and buff done, most of the people that request that are usually RV owners. And so for an RV10, it's about an extra 40 to 50 hours of labor, depending on design. Larger aircraft, it can get into the, hundreds.
Uh-oh, what happened?
I don't think you addressed the situation of how much is an average cost.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, I mean, I can tell you what we charge for a white and 2 stripes on a Comanche. Our cost is $13,500. And that pretty middle ground for this area with the people we run into. You could expect anywhere from I would say you would expect something between 12 and 15 to be your base white 2 stripes. If you want to do a 2-tone, the extra cost, which that would be where you have white on top and then solid blue on the bottom with a stripe. That's 2,000 extra. So that goes from 13,500 to 15,500.
What the scheme, the original Piper scheme, where it comes from the top of the cowling and then under.
Adam, Let me just ask you if you can throw that into the chat window, because I've got a pile of people that are ahead of you.
Sorry.
No problem. Larry, you've had your hand up for a while. I just wanted to have you jump in.
Okay, thanks, CJ. I was late for the meeting. I apologize, and I hope I'm not asking a duplicate question. But my question is, has soda blasting ever been used for paint removal?
The problem with it affects the metal negatively. It scars the metal. I've seen people, I've had people, they love to use it in the wells, and I don't know why. They use it to remove corrosion, and there are other tools that can be used. I've never seen it used in a way that doesn't leave the airplane in worse condition than it was before it was soda blasted.
Okay, good answer. Thanks.
Good. Bill had an interesting question. Are there suggestions for maintaining the paint for washing and polishing?
You know, the biggest thing in washing and is dry wash. So using washing, I can't remember the name of the substance. I'm going to need to text you some stuff that we recommend, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. I apologize. But you can wash your aircraft without soaking it down in water. And the reason I recommend that, although honestly, you guys having Comanches that are primed on the inside, you guys don't realize how great that is. Because what happens, and why I talk to people about this all the time, is, oh, they just rinse their airplane down and all this, and the water gets in the seams. And the water gets wherever the water can get where there's not protection. And that's where your corrosion comes from. And so we often recommend using chemicals to wash it that are just, you know, dry, to keep it dry. So you're using like mineral spirits and things like that that dry quickly, that you're not going to get moisture buildup in areas that you don't want moisture buildup. And you know, that's my recommendations on washing. I'm not a man of great knowledge at this point on the best recommendations for polishing. I read and hear things back and forth all the time. So I don't really have a great answer for you on that one.
Cool. On and William Newhall had a question regarding the twin Comanche versus the single Comanche costs. And then we have quite a few questions about what makes a base with two stripe, for example, well, anyways, we'll get to that in a second. That was Adam's question. But what is it going to cost to add an extra engine to paint?
Probably not gonna like it. Your base price on a twin Comanche is going to be $15,500. The extra work of dealing with an extra engine is an extra nightmare. And if you really think about it, it's 20 hours of labor. You throw that on there, and what it is it just builds up over the process. So it's covering up, it's stripping. Every step, it just adds a little bit of time. And if you're honest with it, as you go over it, you know, you're really looking at adding about $2,000 in labor. The paint cost isn't that significant because it's just not a huge area. So that's where your price goes, basically from $13,500 to $15,500, and then it may go two tones, same sort of thing. Your prices sort of begin to edge up a little bit. And so that's basically how it goes. That extra engine's always extra money.
Makes sense. Is that, William, did you want to drill down into that at all? Okay. Adam's question related to the original 58 Piper scheme, where this is, if you recall, we pulled up everybody so docs.northeastcomanche.org is a place where all of the parts manuals, service manuals up to 2009 are listed for all of the Comanches that Matthew Smith has been able to gather for the Comanche Docs Online project. But it also has a museum section where we've been collecting brochures. And so actually in preparing for this, we were reviewing some of the very, very earliest original Piper paint schemes, which are amazing. So this is goes back to what we were looking at in preparing for this, Luke, and that is the original 1958 Piper scheme where the color comes from the windscreen over the front of the cowling and along the bottom. Is that a two-tone or even more?
See the scheme they're talking about on my phone. I'm showing the camera right now.
Oh,
That one
perfect.
right there? Yes. That would be a two-tone right there, yeah.
Okay, it's just a standard two-tone, nothing more.
That's your that's a stand. So white and two stripes, and then that would be a two-tone.
The other paint shop said it was called a split, and it was even more. So,
well, it would be more. So they call it a split. I've heard it called both. So a white and two stripes is two basic stripes. The Cherokee that we went through, that's a two-tone. And what that's talking about is whenever you're painting, basically the bottom half or top half of the aircraft a different color than white. So you're putting a significant amount of a color on. And that's more expensive labor-wise, paint cost-wise. And you can expect when you're getting certain colors are more expensive. So reds, they're more expensive. They got rid of the lead. It doesn't cover as well. So you have to use more red to get it to cover. And it's a more expensive paint. I've priced reds out from $300 a gallon to $1,600 a gallon. And so,
did you just say 1,600 a gallon?
Yes, $1,600 a gallon. That's like a pearlescent red with mica in it. I mean, this guy was looking to make his plane look like this. And so, but you know, in metallics. So the consumer article on base clears talked about bases oxidizing faster, which I haven't found that to be true. But what they mentioned was metallics, and we don't paint metallics without clearing them. And I don't know why, but metallics do not look good and they do not hold up over time if you don't clear over them. So if you're looking to get your airplane painted and somebody gives you, and you want a base, or you want a two-tone, so you want the white on the top and you want a blue on the bottom, and then it becomes a blue metallic on the bottom. Well, it got more expensive because not only are they going to paint the blue, if they're doing it right, in my opinion anyway, but they're also going to clear over the blue. So you're paying for blue paint and clear over the blue. Now with the base clear, we use a lot more base clear these days. We've been able to bring down our cost for metallic significantly because base paints don't cost as much because they don't have to have all the chemical resistance because the clear is everything in that step. And so the difference in cost is not what it used to be. I see your question on the average cost for a gallon of paint. So our cost for a gallon of Matterhorn white, the white that's on every airplane ever painted, is it's $258 a sprayable gallon. There are cheaper paints. There's a reason we use Jet Glow Express. There's a reason we use the paint Sherwin-Williams activator and hardener. I mean, that's where people cut corners sometimes. They'll buy Sherwin-Williams paint, but they'll buy generic hardener. They'll buy generic reducer. They'll buy a generic activator. And it seems like a great idea. I say seems like, I say that from the perspective of the paint shop guy who's like, oh, I'm going to save some money here. You end up paying more money because you end up doing more rework. Because you have things like flashing, you have blistering, you have solvent pop. All of those things go up when you cut corners on your paint and your paint products. And so we use high quality paint, and I love it. I love the way it looks. And I've had customers come and request specific paints and brands, and I will encourage them to use other paints and what we're familiar with. And I would encourage you, if you're working with a painter who's a good painter who you respect, he paints what he paints because he's used to it and he knows it. There is times when, trust your painter on what he's painting, but I can paint anything. And so we will, but I usually add an upcharge. And sometimes that paint's more expensive, believe it or not, and it's not better. I am not fond of AF 3500. That's Axalta's aircraft. That's their jet paint. And I haven't had a great experience with that. But your painter may tell you it's the greatest paint he's ever painted. And you may see planes that he's painted and it looks great. And you know what? Don't argue with him. If he's doing great work, he's doing great work. But if you're getting cheap paint, you're getting cheap paint. And so don't try to cut corners there. It's always turned out to be a poor decision.
Can you explain the difference between cheap paint and the more expensive, $250, $300 a gallon paints that your shop has found better to use?
Yeah. So, part of it is just the process of working with the paint. My paint guy, I like to say the application, it's easier to work with. And what he's talking about is I'm painting an entire airplane. I need a paint that's made for painting an entire airplane. I need to be able to put a coat on the entire airplane without it flashing on the front before I'm done. And flashing is gonna give you either bad looking paint or it's going to affect the adhesion of the next coat. You've got things you don't want happening when you're painting. And so part of it is working with it. I want to eliminate as much rework, move the process along, things like that. And so for us, it's a better paint to work with because it's made to it takes me an hour to spray a coat on your airplane. Car paints, they're made to be tacked up in 5 minutes. And so if my paint's tacked up in 5 minutes, we're in trouble. You're gonna have a spotted dog is what I call it. Not gonna look good. And so it's made for painting aircraft. It's also, we talked about this already, but they make it for chemical resistance. They make it so that it's designed to be able to flex. So people will use industrial paints, like the paint that's made to paint your Caterpillar, those big industrial equipment. It's real hard paint. And people think, oh, hard paint, that's what airplane paint is. That's true, but it's also flexible. So if you see those paint jobs where chunks of paint are it's not shearing, it's actually coming off in chunks. And what that is that's 90% of the time, that is industrial paint that's been painted on an airplane. And once it starts to crack, and it cracks because it's not made for that, it goes. Aircraft paint will shear. So you'll see tearing. It's easier to fix. Like if I'm doing a touch-up job and I've got to fix sheared paint, it's 10 times easier than trying to fix paint that's coming off in chunks. It started to crack, and then when I'm painting to that, unless I go back and use more industrial paint, that they're not gonna continue to adhere in the same way. So then you're just gonna have chunks coming off here, and then paint that sticks to the leading edge where your paint was coming off before. And so it's sort of, you run into problems eventually when you cut corners, and you run into problems when you don't use the right paint just because it's not made for it. It's not intended. And so that's some of the stuff that comes to mind.
iPad Rick, thank you very much for that. iPad Rick had an interesting question. If you're able to unmute, he asked, what about detail work such as gear and wheels? And I wanted to ask him to unmute in case he wanted to explain this question in more detail. Unless you're like, I know exactly what he's talking about.
It's a great question. Well,
I was thinking it meant, I mean, you can paint something that's got, you know, down and welded versus, you know, our retractable gear. What kind of a difference does it make when you're dealing with a retractable gear airplane like the Piper Comanche versus something that's fixed and welded like the Cherokees?
All the difference in the world. We do a lot of aircraft with retractable gear. The worst is the Bonanzas because they were designed by state. You can't let the interior gear doors out on a Bonanza without starting to collapse the gear. And so for us to paint the gear wells, we actually have to put it on jacks, collapse the gear, or retract them. I guess collapse sounds dangerous. We retract the gear while it's on jacks. We got to take those gear doors off, put the gear back out, and you have to do a gear swing anyway whenever you work on landing gear. Well, you should. And so, you know, it's just they're a nightmare to work on. But you don't chemically strip retractable gear. So we don't spray stripper up in your gear well. There's too much going on. There's too many moving parts. Everything has to be done mechanically. In fact, the part of the difference in price between doing a Cherokee and a Comanche is the fact that we've got to get out there and do those gear well manually. And it's very fun to have your head in there with a tool doing this number and wearing glasses. And but there's so much going on. It takes time. You have to work on them, and it has to be done mechanically. You got to treat the corrosion properly still, and you have to cover them up when you go to paint. So you can imagine what happens when you're painting in a gear well is the wind just kicks right back in your face. I got a guy who works for me who, this is a great story. Had a mechanic who came over and he asked me who was painting our gear wells. And I'm always like, oh no, what did we do wrong? and I told him, he's like, I've taken gear apart and painted them and they don't look as good. And I'm like, well, that's because that guy right over there is the perfect person for that job. He'll spend as much time painting your gear well. I'll have him paint the gear well while I paint the rest of the airplane. So there'll be two of us in there and he'll sit in there with a little touch-up gun and he'll spray all that. And it takes a certain person to get all that done. But it's also covering everything up properly. There's a lot of switches in there. You've got to make sure. So, you know, you don't cover everything up. You don't cover the proper switches. You don't do things. And then, you know, you swing the gear if you're a good shop anyway. But what if your paint shop didn't do that? What if they just sprayed paint up in there and then one of the switches is painted shut? And then you go to, hopefully the gear retract and hopefully they come back out. I hear a lot of horror stories from people. Of course, I think it's tradition if you're a Bonanza flyer that at some point you had to land it without the gear down. But I'm sorry, I've been hard on Bonanza people. They're great people. I like all airplanes. But there is a lot of precautions and safety steps that you need to take when you're doing that because they're retractable gear. And then masking. There's a lot of time spent masking.
I'm going to open the floor. Let's see. Yep. So I'm going to just open the floor for questions at this point. I would like to ask you to talk a little bit about the timing of using Corrosion X, because you had mentioned last night in the prep that it actually needed to be done, I think you said within a month. If you're going to use that afterwards?
You can do it within, or you can do it 30 days after. So the total cure time for aircraft paint is 30 days. You can fly it within 24 hours, but 30 days after is when you would want to do it, is when you can do the Corrosion X. So it's 30 days after the paint. And so I usually, we track everything. So if we put the white on and then you end up picking up your airplane 4 or 5 weeks later after the white, I let you know this is the time when you would want a Corrosion X. You had mentioned, or someone you've been speaking to had mentioned, which is a great piece of information. Fog the wings, don't soak them with Corrosion X. There's 2 ways you can do it. You can get this aerosol can and just spray them down like crazy, and you'll have Corrosion X seeping out the wings for 36 years, but that's not the most beneficial way to do it. If you take it to somebody who's doing it really properly, they fog the aircraft, is what it's called.
Yeah.
And
most of the community will know the person that did this. So we what happens when we put these on is we start getting comments sometimes before the Zoom happens, right, Luke? Because you're getting my texts like, okay, here's a couple of stuff. So in this case, the person that said don't soak it because you don't want it dripping out for the next 6 months was Zach Grant, and most of our community will know who he is. But Zach cautioned that if you do get somebody who soaks the airplane in Corrosion X, it can cause rivets to loosen up, and then you have a more immediate issue. So he said it's a good idea, but moderation in all things.
Yeah, and I was glad to get that, because there are things like that I've been doing this for a long time, so I don't think about making that point about the detail. I tell people I love Corrosion X, but you need to let them know Corrosion X it properly. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah. Anybody else feel free with jump in with your questions at this point. I think we've gone through the stuff in the chat window, except Luke, we have not finished the group buy, but if people have pressing questions, please jump in. But I do want to just cover the discussion that Luke and I had about ways to make painting efficient so that Luke's margins stay good, but the costs come down so much that we benefit as well. And Luke had sent me a pretty compelling proposal based on the prices he's been saying here, which are his lists. If we coordinate as Comanche owners, it looks like we can make our airplanes beautiful and save ourselves quite a lot of money, and Luke still gets to keep his margins up. So, but let me open for just the key questions first, and then we'll come back to that. Unless everybody's so interested in the group buy that they want us to just discuss why it would work.
Well, or I answered every possible question.
We know about that because I had them coming in this afternoon from other people. We could mention some of the cautions that people had sent in. And also people, if you've got your horror stories from your past lives, throw them in. It's always helpful for the rest of us to learn from our community. And it's after 9. So the other thing that I know is happening is people are getting ready to go to bed and put people to bed. I will mention one cautionary tale that came in today related to the fact that sanded rivets, deformed skins from media blasting, inclinometer cleaning of stripper that can cause corrosion, not getting the airframe dry, which Luke addressed quite specifically after power washing can cause adhesion issues. Too much paint can add weight and stiffness. Too little will burn through quickly, and yeah, etc. Can you discuss orange peel, blush, and haze as 2 separate issues, so that we know what they are and what they mean?
Well, they're all kind of different things. Orange peel, I can find it on any paint job. So that anything that hadn't been cut and buffed. But I mean, I see it. I see it on every car driving down the road. I see it all the time. It sticks out to me. And orange peel is caused Orange peel. Now, when you guys see it, you're seeing like the big, huge, what actually looks like an orange peel. And what that is that's paint that's not reduced properly. So it's too thick, or paint that's put on too heavy. It's not typically paint that's put on too heavy, because paint that's put on too heavy usually blisters. Because what happens when you put paint on too heavy in a coat, in a single coat, like you can keep putting coats on and put too much paint on, that's another issue. But if in a coat you put on too much paint, what you get is you get the chemicals on the top film over and create a film, and then everything underneath tries to get out, and it can't, and it pushes the paint and creates blistering. That's what solvent pop is. I should have gotten pictures of solvent pop. There's so many things I think of now, and I'm like, wow, how didn't I grab that? So solvent pop is basically when you've got a perfectly even layer of too thick paint, and all the little solvents try to get out, but they don't get out fast enough. And you have all this little popping on the top. You may not even notice it at first, but what that is all the surface, all that surface of your paint has been broken by the solvents coming out. And obviously that's not a good thing. And it looks bad. And that often might actually be what people are seeing when they think they're seeing hazing. When you get up to it, you look at it and you see, oh, that's solvent pop. Hazing or blushing, typically that's paint flashing, which is going to sound like the exact same thing, only it's not exactly the same thing. And that's when your paint dries too quickly. So you use the wrong activator at the wrong time. Causes it to flash, and it looks, and kind of looks like you got, it's also similar to what it looks like when you get a light coat of overspray on something. And so when it flashes, it dulls out. And then blushing, actually, you may be talking about what I call modeling. Now that I think about it, and that's when the colors in your paint, so like it's obvious, it's very obvious in metallics, and that's when your paint is not flowing out properly, and or you've got a paint that wasn't mixed properly, and you got a lot of different colors in it. So let's say you're spraying an orange, and the orange has some yellow, it's got some red, it's got a lot of color in it, and you spray it on, and it sort of flows out, but you didn't mix it properly, or you didn't spray it quickly enough after you mixed it. And so those colors are actually flowing out from each other. And that can create blushing. It's obvious in metallics because what you have is areas where the metallics are heavy. And that's just paint not mixed properly or sprayed too heavily in one spot, but not heavy enough to run.
Interesting. And you had mentioned, speaking of timing, that a clear plus a cut and buff is going to be the most aesthetically pleasing.
Yes, that is the only paint job that will have zero orange peel. Because that's what you're wet sanding and cutting out when you're going for the perfect paint job.
And that timing looks like what? How long after you do the paint do you do the cut and buff?
So it's interesting because it changes up everything a little bit as far as the process is concerned. Like on a single stage, we get all the colors on there and then we do the touch up. On a cut, buff, base, and clear, you get all the base on there, do all the touch up, then you do the sealer, then you do the clear. Then after you've basically got what would be a finished paint job for a single stage, usually about 2 weeks left to get the cut and buff done. And if you have to fix something on a cut and buff clear, you have to spray typically larger areas. Even if you're fixing, like the problem is like the fact is, if I'm fixing your little silver stripe on the door in a single stage, all I got to do is tape off that silver stripe and fix it. If I'm doing a cut and buff where you can't feel the stripes, I have to respray the whole door. I have to re-clear the whole door to keep the same aesthetic.
Gotcha. I know that you had told me you're a 5 a.m. riser with the business and a 9 p.m. Sleeper. So I apologize for keeping
Oh,
you.
that's all right.
The information and the answers has been amazing. Is anybody got anything last pressing stuff, or can I collect and send you any additional questions?
Absolutely. I mean, I actually enjoy this stuff. I like trying to answer questions. You learn a lot. I've learned a lot through this process. I've really enjoyed it. And it's been good. So I even get my paint rep will have other painters call me sometimes. I've got calls from guys in Atlanta about spraying paint recently because it's a paint that I spray and they hadn't sprayed before. So I like to try to answer questions, try to be helpful.
Yeah. Well, then the draft group buy that we were discussing, just for the folks that have stuck with us this long, and part of the reason that we've delayed in putting it out is because we were looking at all of the devil is in the details, and some definition work that I thought we wanted to put in. And but in essence, what we discovered or discussed was that if you are doing the same type of airplane and again, people get efficient, right, Luke? Or is that a correct definition? They just,
yeah,
you know exactly where you're going to move next.
Yes, and even like so we do it with flight schools sometimes. You know, they'll sign up to bring us 10 of a airplane. It's usually international flight schools, and what happens is you get a routine down. You know exactly what to expect with each step. The employees need a little bit less directing because they're used to doing this plane. They know what the next step is every time. It sort of limits the questioning process along the way, which is great. So that's a big part for sure.
Yeah. And then keeping 8 guys pretty much fully employed, if we can coordinate our schedules and airplanes to get you, so that one finishes and we fly the next one in, was the other efficiency that I think you and I discussed that allowed this to potentially happen.
Yeah, so it makes a huge difference if people are on schedule. Right now, for example, I have 2 aircraft that were supposed to be here 4 weeks ago. They're not here. I got 2 that were supposed to come in this week, and they've delayed without giving me a time when they're coming in. And thankfully, we've been blessed with enough work, and I have enough people on standby that I can reach out to guys and say, hey, you want to bring your aircraft in? These slots opened up. But it is fairly common for people just to not show up when they say they're going to show up. We've tried adding a deposit to hold your spot, but people apparently don't care about their money. To have a guarantee. We love working with people who are timely, because I like being timely, and it makes us timely. Yeah. It's hard to have a schedule when people show up whenever they want, and then you have bottlenecks. Whereas if it's organized, you can limit the number of bottlenecks. I mean, there's just a lot to being organized.
So what Luke had discussed as being something that would work for his shop and team and for us, if you're dealing with a base price of $13,500 for one of our Comanches, is if 3 to 5 of us were able to organize and get in a kind of a timely, organized manner, a savings of 10%, which would be over $1,300, and then with bodywork also discounted, and the additional cost for a 2-tone or a cut and buff, 6 to 9 planes, 12%, and if 10 of us get together, a 15% discount, which with another discount on bodywork, two-tone, and a cut and buff that would save us thousands and make us look very beautiful. So we're gonna continue to sort through that and work out definitions so everybody is really able to make an informed judgment and then publish it. But Luke, do you want to correct or augment or anything what I just said?
Well, no, the only thing I mentioned is that even as you move up from 3 to 5 to 6 to 9, there's a small increase in the discount on the two-tone costs. Yep. From 2,000 to 1,750, and then 10 planes plus, you know, your two-tone drops down to 1,500. Your cut and buff drops down to 3,000. Some of the details I think that you're talking about, which we would really need to work out, is that can't include every possible color. If some reds cost $1,600, you know, I can't give you the two-tone cut and buff with 10 airplanes for, you know, what would be a great price for one of us.
Yeah.
And so there are some details to be worked out there. There are some caveats, but yeah, I mean, I love the idea of working with groups of people. Yeah. I love the idea of being organized. It's so helpful for us, and it should benefit you guys. Because if it benefits us, it should benefit the customer, I think.
We think so. And John Bartley, go ahead and jump in here.
Yes, if you need new wingtips and you need all that plastic replaced on the vertical fin, is it best to do that before you bring it in for painting?
Yeah, so we do fit and replace plastic parts as well. But if you can have your guy do it, or we can do it, but I would do it before I paint it. And so you know, I could our price on our labor price is $95 an hour. And so if you provide the materials, it's just however many hours it takes us to replace them. I couldn't tell you how long it takes my mechanic to do it on a Comanche, but I can tell you he does the wingtips on a 182. He can usually fit both of them in 2 to 4 hours. And so you'd be looking at $400, say, to fit wingtips on a 182, something like that.
Okay. All right, thanks.
That question is going to come up a lot because I know lots of people have got, you know, like I've got an aileron, I've got to, you know, replace and I want to match it to the rest. And so that's a whole other area. I thank you so much, Luke. I know we're keeping you well past an appropriate time. Your knowledge is unique, and thank you so much for sharing it with us. I am really looking forward to working out the details of the group buy. The definitions that will, you know, usually what we try to do is just make sure that we try to set our expectations so that nobody's surprised. And then we always try to make sure that we go through your business process so you're protected. It has to be a win-win, and we're having a lot of fun finding those. The other thing I'm personally excited about is that avionics is a key safety thing, a key value enhancer, and the discoveries working with you, Luke, are going to apply to avionics shops. They must have exactly the same problems. Airplanes that show up or don't show up, you're trying to keep people busy. So these lessons learned, we think these efficiencies are going to help all over. The avionics shops right now are incredibly busy, but
we've been extremely busy right now, but you know, I can't, it's so interesting. It's such an interesting industry, and reliable, just having reliable timelines makes all the difference. Last week was unbelievably busy for me. And it's probably one of the busiest weeks I've had. And it was largely due to the fact that people just showed up and things get bottlenecked. I couldn't keep it to my schedule. And so that falls on the business owner, and I'm responsible for making those things come together. And so I had to do a lot of work to get things back into order. And I'd love to not have as many of those weeks. And a lot of that comes from working with people.
Well,
Out of curiosity, then, you mentioned obviously with problems being people not showing up. What is the policy if someone's obviously made a deposit and said they're going to come to you, but weather stops them from flying, mechanical issue happens with the aircraft that stops them from being able to bring it to you? But do you not worry that if there's a deposit and obviously money on the line, people might be pressured to carry out a flight that otherwise would not be safe to fly?
No, I mean, if somebody's gonna, if any of that comes up, we'll refund them. It's when they just tell me, not gonna happen, because Tuesday was a bad day for me. I decided I didn't want to go.
Or like I pulled out because it's too much money now, or
Exactly.
looks like that.
So that's the sort of thing where like, and it's crazy. Some of these people, you just don't hear from them. They give you a deposit, and then I have their contact information. I'm calling them, and they don't answer their phone. They hang up on me. And I'm like, what's going on?
They don't have the guts to face it. That's all.
Yeah. And so it's very interesting because, to me, if I put the money down.
Zach Grant was explaining Comanche owners to me one day, and he said, we have a really interesting group of people, from folks that could fly anything from the space shuttle on down, and they choose to fly a Comanche, to people who don't have two nickels to rub together and they just love the Comanche and they're flying on a pension.
Yeah.
And we try to make sure they're all welcome and safe.
Don't we actually have a space shuttle pilot or astronaut in the Comanche?
We have two of them, in fact. Yep.
Were they the pilots, or are they like scientists, engineers?
One of them, I believe, is a space shuttle pilot, and the other one is, I think, a straight as scientific astronaut.
Are they going to be at Sun and Fun, the pilot?
Let me think. I will talk to Miller Einsel and John Futter. Both of them happen to be Northeast, which is a little bit of a surprise considering that Cape Canaveral is kind of the place you think of them, and find out. I don't think they're going to be there, but Luke, Pete had asked, will you be, are you expecting to be at Sun and Fun and around to answer questions?
I hope to be able to at least go out to Sun and Fun. I'm always out there. I can get in through the paint shop at Lakeland because that's who I work for. He's the greatest guy in the world. He gives me a badge every time. So I have to show this off as long as we're talking about astronauts. I did some touch-up work for an aircraft, for an owner who was an astronaut. And he didn't tell us. He's the most humble human being I've ever met. And he flew in this crazy weather. I had 2 people cancel on bringing their aircraft. And he gets out of his airplane. He says, "What nice weather to be flying." And I'm like, what is this guy? What's going on? And so I asked him what he does, and he tells me he's a professor of economics for Carnegie Hall or whatever in Pennsylvania. And I'm like, wow.
Oh, Carnegie Mellon.
Carnegie Mellon, thank you. Yeah. That's how much I know stuff. And so, but that's what he tells me. And then I look him up because he's got a strange name, and I won't tell you his name because I figured I might as well save him some. But he did a spacewalk on the space station twice.
Oh, wow.
And so he comes back and I said, "We found out your secret identity." And he's like, "Oh, what's that?" I said, "We found out you were an astronaut." And he's like, "Oh yeah, that was cool."
I always find that astronauts never need to tell people they're astronauts.
Yeah. And so so the first time was when I met him. The second time when he drops his plane off, and he calls me and he says, I brought some stuff from my time at NASA. And so he brought the patches from his flights and gave them to us from his time in space. Like, this guy's the coolest guy in the world. And I was asking him questions. I asked him about, I said, "So what was it like walking, on the space station?" And he said, "Well, the first time I was with Jeremy Ross." I'm like, "Yeah, Jeremy Ross, my best friend." And he's just like, the first guy to walk on the space station. And I don't know. And he's like, and, we didn't know what was going on. So it was kind of exciting. NASA didn't know what was happening. We were out there fixing something. The second time, it was just a regular spacewalk, no big deal.
No big deal.
I think at this point, we pretty well covered the painting stuff. So I'm going to stop the recording. This will be available. This will be available tomorrow morning on the northeastcomanche.org. And you can go back. And for those of you that missed the first half, we are now in daylight savings time. when you get your invitation, notice the Zulu time, because that doesn't change. All right, so I will, and with this point, I will thank Luke and all you guys who have made this a very interesting evening, and I will stop the recording.